coming to you. So I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. You see, it's Wednesday evening when you're watching this, but you notice the cup that's in my hand. Show my initial on it. That's that D. So this is coffee. And so the disclaimer is I'm actually doing this in the morning. So you'll be seeing it pre-recorded. It's Wednesday morning. And I'm not going to be able to do it live today for a really good reason, and I want to talk a bit about the reason before I go on. We all know, and I hope you do know, and if you don't, that there is a shortage of affordable housing in America, and a shortage of affordable housing in Birmingham, Alabama. And the organization that I'm affiliated with, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. I just finished 8-year term as board chair. We are having a groundbreaking along with the city of Birmingham, and we're going to be building 28 houses in the Bellevue Heights community, 28 new houses in Bellevue Heights. That is a great and significant undertaking, and there will be something this evening to commemorate that. The groundbreaking will take place in the morning. And so I'm going to be a little tied up this evening, but I did want to let you know about that because I'm proud of the fact that during my term as board chair for NCRC, we did some outstanding things like buy a $100 million building, established a small business loan fund called Equivoco, transitioned leadership in an orderly and really a great fashion because we were able to bring new leadership in while the old leadership was there, and it worked well. Oftentimes that doesn't work when you do it that way. And of course, this initiative, growing real opportunities for work through housing, GROWTH, growth, and Growth by NCRC has also raised about $100 million that we're buying, rehabbing, and selling houses in many cities and many communities, including Birmingham, Alabama. And I was going to make sure that Birmingham was in the mix. And thanks to all of the folks that made significant loans, equity investments, and contributions to growth. So just want to thank you and want to acknowledge that. Hey, before I get into the couple of things I want to talk about today, let me also mention, please, if you're in business and you want to be recognized, put your information in somewhere people can get it. I was in a couple of conversations this week, and they were talking about information on businesses and directories and things like that. And there are several. The A.G. Gaston Business Institute is one that I certainly promote. I don't know that you just want to do that exclusively, but make sure that if you're in business, that you are visible in business, that people know you're in business, they know how to find you, they know what you do. And that is part of your marketing strategy. And one way of easily marketing and being seen is to make sure your business is listed in business directories. There are folks looking for lists. Now, I can argue about what that means, and it doesn't always mean what it should mean, but make sure that you're there. Enter your information in the A.G. Gaston Business Directory, gastonbusiness.com, gastonbusiness.com, I think. I don't want to mess that up. Anyway, tomorrow as well, the Birmingham Business Resource Center will host its City Source Opportunities Forum. We're doing it every month. You can go on myBBRC.biz to get more information and to register if you're looking for opportunities. And tomorrow we have a representative from UAB to talk about some of the business opportunities that are available there. We'll also have that's Demetria Scott. We'll also have Reginald Smith from SABRE. SABRE is a community development financial institution. And Reginald will be talking to you about how you get money. Oftentimes our businesses cannot go to banks, and we have to go to other organizations. And CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, were set up to do the kinds of loans that banks aren't going to do. Not that I usually don't use the term they aren't able to do it, because they are able if they desire to, but they have some standards, and we understand that. But we're happy that there are organizations like SABRE that will do some of those transactions, some of those loans that banks are unwilling to do. So that is tomorrow. myBBRC.biz. You can go there and get the information. It's going to be Thursday morning. I had to look at this, me with drinking this coffee. So, a couple of things I really want to talk about. We just celebrated, and I want to underscore and kind of put some emphasis on that word celebrate. And we did celebrate and reflected on Juneteenth. It's the day that Union Army General marched into Texas and basically told the slaves that were in Texas that they were free and had been free for the last 2.5 years. Now, you can just imagine 1865 America, if you were black and uneducated, if you had been born into the system of slavery, then that's what you know, and that's who you are, unfortunately. And unless your master, and I read some of the accounts from some of the people who, reflected on the fact that their masters knew, but needed that labor. Their masters knew that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln, but they withheld that information from their slaves. And so it took enforcement by Union troops to reach the slaves in those remote states. Texas was sort of a remote state, if you can imagine. 19th century America, 1865. And so even though that is a date that is to be remembered, sometimes I kind of get a little eerie feeling about what our celebration ought to look like. Recognition, I get. Celebration, I get that too. But when you think about the fact that just last month, as we were getting ready for Juneteenth, we had this murder of George Floyd that really kind of turned the tide and rekindled a conversation about racial justice, both civil justice, criminal justice, and economic justice. And then we recognized, and again, maybe not celebrated, the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. And just thinking about the fact that that even in Tulsa, there has really been nothing done to the folks that perpetrated that, nor their ancestors. There wasn't anything done in the 1920s when it happened. Even the fact that we haven't passed that George Floyd Criminal Justice and Policing Act. So, I mean, we have some things that we still need to do before we celebrate. President Biden was in Tulsa, and he talked about, bridging racial inequality. And I think that that's a good thing for us to start thinking about. I think it's a good thing for us to start thinking about growing and building black wealth. But I'm concerned that we're not willing to do enough. So you take, we're going to take $100 billion over 5 years, $20 billion a year would be, the math on that. But is that enough? How are we calculating what is enough to really start to bridge and bring together and cure the divide, the racial divide that really has happened to black folks, by white folks? many of whom families became wealthy as a result. I mean, when you look at some of the metrics, when you look at black home ownership, being like 42%, 73% for white folks. So that's a big gap. When you look at the fact that our business revenue pales in comparison to that of white businesses, when you look at the fact that our net worth, that's the value, the difference between your assets and your liabilities is your net worth. Our net worth only averages 10% or less of that of a white family, and unfortunately headed in the wrong direction. And so we've got to have some bold action, bold proposals, and we can't just accept things that sound good and say that they are good. I was on a call yesterday, and we talked about the fact that banks are prone to make these billion-dollar commitments and billion-dollar commitments and $800 million commitments, and I've been a part of NCRC, and we've got banks to do $300 billion in community benefits agreements, and all that's good. It really sounds good, but the devil is in the detail. The proof is in the pudding. So just because it sounded good doesn't mean that it ends up being good. And so, yes, we do need to have more dollars going to black businesses. We do need a more aggressive and robust procurement system that actually works to try to make sure that our companies get to sell, And it's not just the window dressing. It's not just the billion-dollar commitments that make the headlines. But at the end of the day, we measure. We measure the effectiveness. We measure the commitment toward the actual. And that's one of the things that I'm really concerned about, even with some of the commitments that we have here locally. It's easy to make a commitment, but how do we measure, and who measures? Who's the accountant? Who's the auditor? Who goes in and checks to see if the numbers that you committed to and the numbers that you reported are the same? And not to say that they have to be the same. Chances are they may not be. But at the same time, it helps to have an honest accounting, because an honest accounting will give us an opportunity to fix stuff. So, yeah, in this year since this racial reckoning as a result of George Floyd's death and Tulsa, we've got to figure out how to make sure that we invest in community. We've got to figure out, as we celebrate Juneteenth, that it's not just a remembrance of what happened in 1865, but it's a promise, of what is to come in the coming years. And so we haven't been able to deliver that in 150 years, but we must continue to do it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Enjoyed the conversations at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute on Saturday. The rain, the rain was persistent, to say the least. But people were there. The park, was actually on a rainy day. It was still festive, and so we were happy to be able to be there. So anyway, I want to shift gears, and I'm a news junkie. I've said that many times, and I just want to say this: if you watch the news and you see what's happening in Congress and in these state legislatures, to say that democracy is in jeopardy, that's not an overstatement. That's not hyperbole. Decisions that are being made by state elected officials that are and federally elected officials are actually impacting our standing as a democracy as we speak. Votes are being taken, and there are bills and laws, I think 60-something bills in 40-something states, that are going to really determine whether we continue to have free and fair elections. There are others with ramifications as to who decides what the election result says. that somebody can say, well, no, those votes are wrong and these were right, and we're not going to certify them. And we just saw that. It almost seems like we have one party, the Republican Party, that has decided that this custom of one man, one vote, this custom of majority rule, this custom of a government for and by the people is just antiquated. It doesn't really work anymore. And they seem to favor autocracy, kleptocracy over democracy. I mean, they're actively, currently suppressing votes and voters, positioning themselves as the ones who make the decisions, despite the will of the people. We're seeing this take place right before our eyes. And we saw the senators and representatives challenge the results of the last election. We saw it with our own eyes. We saw them, even after a riot, stand up and try to block the certification of an American president. This wasn't Belarus. It wasn't some third world country. This was America, and this is what they did. If we're not careful, we'll mess around and we'll have a ruling class. And I started thinking about this ruling class, comprised of wealthy folks and wealthy politicians, or politicians who are controlled by wealthy folks. A ruling class doesn't have to be a majority. In fact, with a ruling class, the minority can win. You don't have to have the most votes, and that's what we're faced with now. You can win without the most votes. And actually, President Trump won without the most votes, and George Bush won without the most votes in the system that we have now. And we're headed again in the wrong direction. We're headed to a point where wealthy rulers in and out of Congress, in and out of state legislatures, can decide who serves, can decide who makes laws. And those people are going to make laws that are self-serving, that serve themselves. We're putting ourselves in a position where, and when you look at the length of time a lot of our people in office stay in office, because we don't have term limits, which we really need at every level of government, but because we don't have term limits, we're putting ourselves in a position that once you get in, you're in. Once you get in, you're in as long as you want to be in, and we can't have that in America. You know, it really is disheartening to see what's happening and to hear what's happening, to hear the minority leader of the Senate, one of the most influential politicians in this country, say, there's nothing to see here. Everything worked like it was supposed to. I guess he feels like his side is winning, and winning is all that matters. So right doesn't matter. Justice doesn't matter. All these folks who claim to be Christian, Christianity doesn't matter. They're actually convenient Christians. They're Christians when it's convenient. They're Christ-like when it's convenient. You know, Christ was not about lying, stealing, deceiving, mistreating the poor, and folks who are defenseless. That wasn't what I read in my Bible. It's not who I think Christ was. And so when you say that you're a Christian and then you stand up in front of the American people and lie, when you say that you're Christian but you don't help the least of these, you're not welcoming, you're not giving, you're not charitable and benevolent, then you know, I see your lips quivering, but I don't hear a thing that you're saying. And here's another point, and I'm almost done. Even if you're a Republican, and even if you supported Trump, and even if you like Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham or even Mo Brooks, oh boy, what's happening to this country has to bother you. When you see someone say, as the Capitol building was being invaded, as you see the nooses that were hanging, as you hear them saying, hang Mike Pence and where's Nancy, and you see them breaking windows and assaulting security. When you see Congress people, the same ones that are saying there was nothing to see here, were hiding and quivering and afraid for their lives, then that still has to bother you. I really, and I know who my audience is, and I understand. I share this with your white friends, because they got to own up to some of this. They've got to be bothered by this. If you care about this country and you care about the ideals that America said it had. But if you're willing to have a ruling class, if you're and if you're not in it, then you're going to be subject to it. Keep in mind that rulers, kings, autocrats, they have subjects. Monarchs have subjects. So you're either going to be a monarch or you're going to be one of the subjects. And I dare say that I don't care. And, you may be, a corporate executive and you may be making a few $100,000 a year. You're not in the monarchy. Trust me, you're not in the monarchy. You're not in the 1%. You're down here with us. You're with the 99%. And so you need to act like, think like, vote with, and care about the same things that we care about. The last time there was an autocratic ruler on this continent, it was a cat named King George. Y'all remember him? Did you vote for him? No. Did he get voted in? No. King George of England. And King George's rule in America was ended by something we all studied in school. It was the Revolutionary War. That was the last time that was a monarch, an autocrat, a ruler in America. Now, they're not unusual. There are some right now. I mean, you could name them: Putin, Xi from China, Lukashenko, Kim Jong-un. These are names that come to mind. These are rulers. Hey, America, are we headed in that direction? Are we headed toward something other than democracy, something where there is a ruling class? Because a ruling class can give rise to a ruler, to an autocrat, to a dictator. I'm concerned, and I hope all of you are too. Hey, thanks for listening. This is Bob Dickerson with In the Black.